Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuel Ochoa, principal and founder of Ochoa Urban Collaborative. I am also an S-Band advisor, and I am pleased to welcome you to this afternoon's session, Open for Business, Helping Small Businesses Adjust to Neighborhood Change. Today, you will hear from three nationally recognized experts to learn about how their work is helping support BIPOC and immigrant-owned businesses. We will learn how you can use data tools, strategies, and interventions to help businesses in your commercial district stay in place. First, we will hear from Steven-Alfonso Maldonado, Program Manager at the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. NowCab is one of the first organizations to develop data indicators to measure neighborhood change and gentrification as it is happening and where it will occur next. He will talk about how data is helping to empower commercial districts advocate for change in their community. Welcome, Steven-Alfonso. And second, we will hear from Larisa Ortiz, Managing Director of Public Nonprofit Solutions at Streetsense, a leading creative and consulting firm in placemaking, retail, hospitality, and food and beverage. Larisa is also a member of S-Band's advisory board. Larisa will share information on the Commercial District Needs Assessment, a tool developed in partnership with the Local Initiative Support Corporation that diagnoses commercial district needs and identifies investment priorities. Welcome also, Larisa. Good to see you. And finally, we will hear from LeJuano Varnell, Executive Director and Main Street Manager at Sweet Auburn Works in the landmark historic Sweet Auburn District in Atlanta, Georgia. LeJuano will talk about how the Main Street model provides a framework for interventions in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood that has helped to advocate for infrastructure investments and programs that are helping small businesses stay in place. And welcome also, LeJuano, and thank you to this great panel for coming together today. So to get started, we'll turn first to Steven-Alfonso. Go ahead, Steven.
Great. Thank you, Manuel. Appreciate it. Thank you also for having us be here today. I hope everyone's having a great and informative time. As Manuel said, my name is Steven-Alfonso Maldonado. I am the program manager at NowCab, the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. We are a CDFI. We are a membership organization as well. And with that, we're working to really be able to connect unique groups from across the country together. We have more than 190 asset building organizations that are in 40 states, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. Our main focus here at NowCab is being able to strengthen the economy by advancing economic mobility of Latino communities. We additionally also work with other community colors as well. We work to be able to scale the flow of not only public investment, but as well as private capital that can be able to be used to be able to build and preserve assets in the community. We want to make sure that these assets that we're building are also going to be maintained and preserved in those communities as well. And we do this work through a variety of ways. We can be able to share some information about that later. And some of the ways that we're doing that is through our work in impact investing, advocacy, as well as capacity building. As a CDFI, we can be able to lend to our member organizations. And then from there, those organizations are able to then create and produce affordable housing. They're able to work in preservation work. Additionally, some of our member organizations are focused on small business development, and they're able to lend to direct small businesses as well. Through advocacy, we're working with our DC office to be able to elevate the voices of our members and the small businesses that they're working with to be able to help and influence public, private, as well as governmental partnerships focused on being able to increase the values Latinos are bringing to the table. Additionally, we do work in capacity building. This work is directed at supporting nonprofit organizations to be able to help those communities. And we do that through grant making, technical assistance, training, and our fellowship program that is focused on elevating the next generation of leaders. There's three main programs that NALCAP also hosts: our financial capacity building program, our small business development program, as well as equitable neighborhood development. Through financial capacity building, we are helping households build intergenerational wealth, and we do this through increased saving programs, credit building, and debt relief programs. Our small business development is focused on supporting small businesses as well as small business serving organizations. And we are able to then help them with growth opportunities as well as technical assistance and providing new sources of capital and increasing opportunities for them. Through equitable neighborhood development, often called END, we focus on neighborhood change and community impact through the lens of investment and community planning. And through the END program, we really focus on collecting and analyzing GIS data to then show the relationship between socioeconomic and demographic trends, as well as the investments in certain areas that can be able to change those. One of the main ways that we're able to do that is through our neighborhood trend analysis. And this method is really this method is kind of our bread and butter. And what we really work to be able to do is analyze socioeconomic, demographic, as well as real estate data that is then used to project and show the impacts that market activity is having in vulnerable communities. I'm going to go ahead and share more information about this method, as well as provide resources for it at the end of the presentation. But this model is used as a comparative model that is based on census data as well as American Community Survey data to indicate the rate of change in a growing neighborhood. The neighborhood trend analysis utilizes these indicators. We're looking at median rent, looking at household incomes, looking at race and ethnicity information. And with that information, we're then using it to compare to the city data as well. So they're going hand in hand to be able to use a comparison model. And then we are able to create a better understanding of the direct census tracts that are changing, as well as the scale of the change that is occurring within those census tracts compared to the city overall. This is a direct table that includes information that discussed in some of our indicators. It's a comparative of the 2019 census, as well as the San Antonio, where NALCAB is located at in San Antonio, Texas. With this, we're able to then be able to paint a better picture of really what's occurring in these areas, as well as a bird's eye view of this change that's happening and how rapidly it's happening as well. Here is our neighborhood trend analysis. This is a model of San Antonio, and with those indicators that we use, we scale the city as well as map it to be able to identify areas based on our neighborhood trend score. The innermost area of San Antonio, located in the smaller loop, that is the downtown area. To the right of that is Census Tract 1919, that is northeast of downtown. Something to really be considered of and be aware of is the way that San Antonio had an initiative for a decade of downtown, which was in place by a previous mayor. And with that initiative, there was great investment that came to the area and great events, as well as capital that was brought to the area. And the specific area of Census Tract 1919, is a community here that's called Dignity Hill. With that, it is predominantly African American, it is predominantly Hispanic, Latino identifying as well. And unfortunately, it was drastic change that was brought to the area. And as a result of that downtown initiative, it's now facing its own issues around home cost and displacement as a result. These indicators here are scaled at 1 to 4, and with that, the higher density areas of change are identified in the most dark. And through this model, we're really analyzing the trends to see where past change has occurred, as well as where those changes may expand to. With this information, we're then utilizing it to be able to provide data-driven, as well as place-based approaches to address areas of rapid and drastic changes. In this situation specifically, we can be able to really have a direct correlation because of our understanding of our own city, of where this investment is taking off to, as well as the surrounding areas of it, to see how it's laid out as high impact. And what we've seen in our work with other organizations, that's not always the case. So after analyzing and understanding the rate of change and how census data and the American Community Survey data is showcasing the drastic change in the areas, we look to identify the factors of that change. Usually these factors include public-private investment, which is around new development, housing affordability. We're talking about maybe new areas of growth that include like a sport complex, access to public transit, subways, or trains, something that really is a changer and a catalyst of change that we're able to be aware of. Additionally, we lay out this model to showcase the way that San Antonio property values are increasing. This would normally play out. Unfortunately, there's some technical issues, but it's an overlay model of changes that are going from low values to high values that we've seen occur over the time of 2011 to 2018. Additionally, NALCAB works with our partners and institutions to be able to refine our methodology. We also provide tools and resources to our membership organizations. We have produced an equitable neighborhood development guide that is a tool for the organizations to be able to understand not only the change and displacement that's happening in their own area, but then to see how that is being reflected in commercial corridors, housing prices, as well as drastic change in socioeconomics in the area. We are undergoing some analysis of our own to be able to continuously refine this process, and we're hoping to share that with the public soon. And we also want to recommend anyone that is looking to be able to gain more information about this, or to be able to use this model in their own community, to partner with a local organization similar to NALCAB, a private planning firm, or possibly a local university or college, to be able to really take a bird's eye view of your own community. And if you have any interest in this data, as well as additional opportunities that NALCAB will be able to share about small businesses or changes in community, please connect with us, either it be through me or other NALCAB staff here at this conference. I appreciate the time and ability to share this with everyone, and I welcome some new partnerships to be made as a result of it. And thank you so much. Appreciate it. Now I can pass it over back to Manuel.
Thanks, Steven-Alfonso. Thanks for the great presentation. There's a lot of information there. And I just wonder, before we go on to our next presenter, if you could just talk just a brief moment about the survey work that a lot of the communities have done, and also the kind of small business data that is used in the index.
Great. So
provider.
We collect commercial data to be a reflection of a lot of the work that is done to analyze our community. We talk about the way that of turnover, as well as some small business surveys that are a result of providing some drastic changes that are seen. A lot of this was also a reflection of COVID and seeing how small businesses were impacted. Additionally, we're looking at ways that we can be able to provide additional support, both at a federal level as well as a more localized level and private funding for small business associations. We're working also with larger entities that are community development organizations, really focused on being able to provide the smooth transition of information as well as resources.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions later on. And so now let's turn to Larisa Ortiz. And Larisa, we're looking forward to talking about the work that you've done in commercial districts in New York and also elsewhere around the country. Welcome, glad to see you.
Thank you, Manuel. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm here to talk about the work that we've done for many years with the Local Initiative Support Corporation. And in this case, we completed a program over a period of 3 years called the Commercial Corridor Challenge, which was done with LISC with the support of City Community Development. and in partnership with the New York City Department of Small Business Services. And our goal was to work with those organizations and identify community-based organizations, CBOs, who would receive support and resources to improve their commercial corridors through really tactical, rapid, short horizon time investments. Because what we're trying to do is build the capacity of these organizations and also build their credibility to do more work like this in the future. We wanted to focus on a few things. So we're clearly catalyzing investments, informed by all of the work that our teams had done in best practices nationally. We knew early wins were so critical for that credibility that I just mentioned. And we knew that those opportunities would give us ways to bring additional resources to these corridors. And in almost every case, these efforts resulted in more resources from city council people, from foundations who were excited by this work and the capacity we were building. We wanted to support existing businesses, improve resident perception of what was happening. So that was as critical as how the businesses experienced this, and ultimately build the capacity of these organizations and the relationships with vendors and partners to make sure they were able to continue this over time. So we worked in 3 neighborhoods. This was actually, we've done this in 2 rounds. So we've worked with, I think it's 7 neighborhoods in total, but for this round, it was Southern Boulevard in the Bronx, Fulton Street, in partnership with Cypress Hill LDC in Brooklyn, and Bay Street in partnership with Staten Island Chamber of Commerce. And these had to be, we went through a selection process. It was competitive. These organizations had to demonstrate that they were high capacity organizations. They had to be existing recipients of New York City Small Business Services funding, their 360 program. So they had to be existing grantees. And we had to know that they were already working in historically underinvested communities. And so these are the organizations we ended up working with. So in every case, we went in and looked at existing conditions. So when on Fulton Street, which is absolutely facing a significant neighborhood change, there was a rezoning proposal that was in the works. And so we knew we were going to see a lot of development in this neighborhood. And this is to give you a sense of what it looks like. We recognized there were wonderful assets. It was very pedestrian friendly. There was a merchants association sort of information. So we wanted to leverage that a little. The local partner had existing business relationships. So that was great. One of the reasons why we chose them. There's a really high density of stores and already bustling activity, and new stores were opening, but there were challenges. That train that I showed you really created this dark corridor, and it felt foreboding. And we knew we had to do something about that. There were crime hotspots, which we mapped. Residents and merchants told us that lighting was insufficient, that storefronts didn't have the kind of transparency they needed, sanitation and litter, and that also the city was cracking down on signs and awnings, and businesses were really struggling to pay those fines. So we needed to help them. So we went through super quick. It was about 4 to 5 weeks of doing a quick analysis, and then we decided on a few interventions. We led a community workshop in crime prevention through environmental design principles to help businesses understand the value of transparency and what they could do with their businesses to improve the perception of safety and deter crime through investments. We launched a storefront improvement program, which is focused on executing on those policies, those SEPTED principles, through improvements to signs, awnings, windows. And then we said, look, soap and water strategies are often so important and critical. We engaged a vendor to do a really deep power wash of the street. And here's an example of the before and after. We worked really closely with the CDC to find businesses that are interested in participating. And we applied all the SEPTED principles to this. And this business owner was phenomenal. He was so excited to receive these improvements. And he said on day 1, he saw traffic increase. And this is part of the goal. If we want him to stay while the neighborhood changes around him, he's got to upgrade and improve. But many of these small businesses don't have the capital to make those improvements. So these resources are really critical. Here's another example of an awning, Marion's Beauty Center, before and after. and then a barbershop, Martin's Barbershop. So we really wanted to give them, the upgrades and the improvements and make sure that these improvements aligned with city code so they wouldn't be hit with fines. And at the end of the day, we were thrilled. The merchants were so excited. Many started doing these improvements on their own and implementing these efforts. And, they felt that the Cypress Hill LDC was a partner in helping them navigate fines for their awnings and signage. So, Cypress Hills was able to raise its profile as a partner. And at the end of this, we conducted surveys, and 67% of survey respondents said they saw this improvement. They experienced it. 64% said they were encouraged by these improvements and wanted to visit the corridor more. And in total, we worked with 9. In total, there were 9 businesses that expressed additional interest in improving their storefront. So this really set the stage for more investment. Quickly running through Bay Street, Staten Island. This is what that street looks like. Lots of challenges. It's a gateway to Staten Island. There was no sense of arrival. They had this wonderful restaurant niche, but a really weak pedestrian environment, and like Cypress Hill, safety concerns. So again, some similarities, right? Soap and water is always key, but we did it really in an extreme way here. We brought in a vendor who did weeding and planting and tree pit planters. We worked on lighting because lighting was a real issue, and I'll show you the gobo light that we installed at the gateway, which helped to support their branding of the corridor. And then we had targeted storefront improvements with an emphasis on lighting and signage. So it wasn't the full facade like you saw previously. So here's an example of some of the, the weeding and the power washing. These are the before and the afters. We gave every single business these wonderful A-frame signs, which you can see here on the right. We helped them with planters. And again, businesses were thrilled. And in fact, they were so excited by this, they started wanting to form a business improvement district on their own, which is sort of our goal. And we help businesses install lighting. So Taverna Pizzeria, and you can see the gobo light on the right, which is a way to communicate this brand and support brand resonance for downtown. But also note, it's a light. It was not painted, so we did not need any permitting for that intervention. And that was really critical when you try to do things quickly. So the chamber built wonderful relationships, built their capacity, and now they're managing and moving forward with the business improvement district, and may actually have advanced to business improvement district. The last, quickly, is Southern Boulevard. Similar challenges with the pedestrian environment, but in this case, they had a lot of construction going on and inactive storefronts, safety issues. And so in this case, we did wayfinding and district signage, banners and construction fencing. We worked with them to pull together a pop-up vendor market in vacant space. They had a lot of vacant space, and again, with storefront improvements. So the vendor pop-up market was about helping BIPOC businesses sell and grow their presence in the market. These before pictures of the construction surrounds around the trees were wrapped in branded banners that helped elevate the sense of place and the brand residents of the community. And we put those banners also on the poles. And then the storefronts, which were covered in graffiti, got local treatment from local artists. Everything was local. We could have gone to, national artists and we had the resources for that, but this was about local pride, and businesses were so excited. In every case, the art installation was connected to what the place sold. And then, our partner, Wedco, had a space that they weren't really using very well, and they applied all of their principles to the space here with respect to transparency, decluttering, and really, even though it's an office, adding to the experience of walking down the street. And like in the other instances, building trust with merchants and showing that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, and your interventions actually make a difference, was really critical to making sure that people went to them after this exercise was over. And on Southern Boulevard, they saw an increase in foot traffic after this. 73% of survey respondents really said that the corridor improved. They got additional funding from a council member to increase sanitation efforts, $25,000. And then they got funding from the Department of Design and Construction to expand their graffiti removal efforts. And so with that, I will hand it over to Manuel.
Great. Thank you, Larisa. And it's great to see how simple changes can make such a big difference in a commercial district. I know that our audience will definitely be interested in how they can download the tool that was used, the assessment tool, if it's available, and also what you referred to as the CEPTED, which are environmental design principles for safety. I bet that they're interested in that. But with that, before we go into questions, I would love to welcome LeJuano Varnell back to our virtual stage to tell us about Sweet Auburn District, and would love to hear and see about the great work that your organization has been doing in this historic African American district in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome, LeJuano.
Thank you, Manuel, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've really enjoyed these last two presentations. It's remarkable context for those of us who think about this holistically. I'm coming to you as a Main Street manager in Atlanta, Georgia, for the Sweet Auburn Historic District, an organization that's a private nonprofit, Main Street, called Sweet Auburn Works. And we chose the Main Street model because the landowning stakeholders, the residents, the institutions believe in preservation-based growth for this neighborhood. When we think preservation-based, we're thinking more cultural heritage preservation. This is a 170-plus-year-old historic African-American neighborhood founded on church institutions, small business institutions, large business institutions in the spirit of African-American excellence. And it's that ethos that guides the revitalization process and why we chose the Main Street model. This is a little bit of what we see today, this old juxtaposed against the new. It strikes me as remarkable how prescient the Main Street model was in thinking how, and in engaging and informing and enfranchising an existing business community. The 4-point model works so well. What you've seen me circle two that fit our operating model really well, the economic vitality side that I think hopefully for those of you familiar with the model, it's literally creating a place for capital to land in your neighborhood. And on the promotion side, it's think more storytelling and promoting the unique assets that make your neighborhood your favorite neighborhood that you represent. I'll add, in design, you've heard Larisa speak really well about, and I think Manuel just even engage the CEPTED model, where you can make engagements in physical space to create just the right operating environment for existing businesses to flourish. I will say before we move on that there are lots of our communities that have had sustained, prolonged lack of investment, disinvestment, exported capital out of our neighborhoods. And when you hear me talk about these interventions that we make along these three prongs, it comes from that perspective. It comes from a neighborhood that is looking to reintroduce new capital, reintroduce new investment, reintroduce new footfalls, reintroduce new residences in the neighborhood. And with that, our job in our mind as a Main Street organization is to ensure that our small businesses have the opportunity to take advantage of that growth without feeling like they have to be to relocate, be pushed out, or be moved. There's no scenario where our new growth will be to the detriment of our existing small businesses. So back to our history, what you're looking at in this image represents 7 of the 16 Green Book sites in the city of Atlanta, Georgia in 1950. That's important because, again, it helps you think about, from a place-based perspective, how we think about our ethnic past and the path towards our future and how we grow. I also want to remind people that a lot of our neighborhoods, that intermediaries like main streets in African-American neighborhoods represent, have had some detrimental change. This is a highway that's ripping up what would soon be an historic African-American neighborhood. This is the Sweet Auburn district that received the 75-85 corridor in the late 1950s, early 60s. Everyone, I hope, is aware that in the first act last year, Build Back Better, there's a Reconnecting Communities Act that's helping communities like ours rethink or to help mitigate this investment and the idea. I'm sorry, this intervention in our neighborhoods and how to mitigate against the negative effects of them and use them hopefully as a way to reconnect. Hence the name of the act. So again, we think about taking our historic and turning it our future. What you see on the right is actually my office that sits in an historic 1913 African-American design, built, financed, and owned building called the Oddfellows Building, and the historic business you're looking at is an old drugstore called Milton and Yates. At the ground level, we're creating interventions, a lot of which that you heard Larisa speak of, business owner to business owner, property owner to property owner, ensuring that they have a place in the growth of this neighborhood. So what does that look like in real time? We guide with inspiration, we guide with imagination, and we take a legacy property owner like Wheat Street Church, for example, and help them take a dated, a very 50s car period strip mall of sorts of strip retail, and help them reimagine it into something that is a more welcoming place for new capital to land, for new small businesses that this Main Street organization helps cultivate. In addition to helping property owners, legacy African-American property owners, we also help legacy African-American businesses. Chef Sonia, seen here from Sweet Auburn Bread Company, who happens to be Bill Clinton's favorite cheesecake maker. We are in the process, we designed earlier in the year and now in the process of renovating. Where demolition's done, and we're actually rebuilding this small 500 square foot baker in the neighborhood, ensuring that her last 25 years in my neighborhood are just as successful as hopefully her next 25 years when her son takes over the bakery. It is not always the case that our business owners have either the capital or the vision to think about what the next generation of their longevity in my neighborhood looks like. And our job is to bring expertise from outside service providers, subsidized capital to help them finance these interventions. And also, for those who don't have this job every day, there's a lot of personal handholding and intervention and guidance when it comes to this growth that often in other cultures and other markets could be organic, but here it's guided. And when people use the language of ecosystem for small businesses in a community, we like to think that our personal small business interventions with our owners, and then having those owners share their experiences and work together, is the thing that creates this notion of ecosystem. Ecosystem is a notion such that we believe you share with each other, you grow with each other, you learn from each other, and we all benefit. So I rarely even use the word ecosystem, but what I say is, look, we roll up our sleeves, we get our hands dirty, and we do the hard work with each small business, with each property owner. In addition to existing, we also look to help our legacy property owners with new. There's a nonprofit CDC called HTDC that had agglomerated a few parcels and dreamt to have a development called Front Porch that sits in the space of what you see in the picture above. It's 70 units of affordable housing. It's 20,000 square feet of retail. And it, as you can see, it wraps around and includes historical buildings in our landmark and National Historic District. It's our job to assist to ensure that alongside their affordable residential, they've built in affordable commercial as well for mom and pops and for people who would want to bring an opportunity to this neighborhood, but don't want to feel as if they don't have an opportunity to grow with us. And so our job is to help cultivate those aspirational business owners who are empathetic and sympathetic to the growth of the neighborhood that we create. So I want to use this last image to help us, to help guide our thoughts around sort of the role of a Main Street and our responsibility to our existing, again, businesses and property owners, especially if they're of color. Everything that you've seen here is Black owned. And unfortunately, the way it seems to work on a national basis, our Black owned nonprofits have a responsibility to land without and building culture and resource without normally having the resources that come available. We also, as you can see in the image above, we have a little bit of a sidewalk challenge and we have a little bit of a lighting problem. And as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, we spend a lot of time assisting on that side in helping the municipality sort of refresh and reimagine and renew our streetscapes. But it's only at the behest of the new investment and the sustained, prolonged African American investment that goes along our neighborhood. Guys, I hope I've inspired you to think about some very hands-on tactical techniques to work with your legacy business and landowners. I'll give it back to Manuel, and feel free to ask us any questions you like.
Thanks, LeJuano, for a great presentation. And why don't we go ahead and bring everyone back on stage, and we'll have some Q&A. And while we bring up Larisa, great, everyone's here. LeJuano, just to start with you, there's we don't have a lot to unpack, but I know that something that the S-band network is so interested in is the whole question about capital. And certainly the technical assistance piece of this is very important. But if you could talk a little bit about whether Sweet Auburn works, are you all a CDFI, or are you working with banks and other CDFIs to help fund the businesses that you work with?
Thanks for the question, Manuel. We are Main Street program. We're just a private nonprofit 501c Main Street program that believes that many of our African American neighborhoods require an intermediary organization to help shepherd in the new growth of the districts they represent, the neighborhoods they represent. So on the capital side, we use a lot of promotion technique and tactic to describe our intrinsic assets, to talk about what's special about the neighborhood, but what's special about the businesses that we have, the institutions that we have, the path that we're moving in, and we inspire new capital to help grow with us, right? I use the language of empathetic capital, empathetic development partners. We say that our highest and best use may not necessarily be your highest and best use if you're strictly market capital. And then we cultivate an environment where we create an entree for those who are interested in affordable commercial investment, affordable residential investment, people who want to see businesses grow in place and not be displaced. And it's courting the banks. It's courting the foundation community here in Atlanta. It's nationally. It's courting corporates who believe that they can put a best foot forward by ensuring that Atlanta, let me back up. The city of Atlanta has the third highest number of Fortune 500 companies behind New York and Houston. And the growth of the city will be on one side based in those institutions, and also neighborhood led and grown. And our job is to create the blueprint of how new investment and capital at the neighborhood level in the city of Atlanta cultivates small business, cultivates neighborhood by neighborhood focused, preservation minded growth of this city that benefits all, especially residents, and makes an inclusive place for everyone who wants to live here.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I know there's a lot more interest on that, but I wanted to turn to Larisa and ask, we have a question here. People were very interested in the interventions that were done in the commercial districts. Can you share a little bit about what the cost was about some of
Sure.
those interventions, like the power washing and the awnings, or maybe as like a package in some of each of the districts?
Sure. So we went into each district with about $50,000 to $70,000 for direct program costs, and so we knew we were working towards a budget in every case, and so my work as a consultant was to back into that budget with the best thinking and to help them identify vendors who could do that work quickly and efficiently, and so that was those are the program costs. We estimated another $15,000 in staffing cost to the organization, which was given to them in the form of a grant. And then, of course, there was the overhead associated with all the partners and staff. So staff, my consulting time for technical assistance and guidance, because we met with them on a very regular basis to just troubleshoot. I will say in the course of one of the projects, we had to mid-course correct, and they didn't know, that what we initially suggested wasn't working. They had to come back to us, and very quickly we pivoted. We said, we still have $8,000. What can we do with it? And that's when we went with a third party to come and clean the street and do, they painted elements of the street. It was amazing, the before and afters. And I was able to find that person. So, I only have the budget for the direct program and the staff. So every organization receives $75,000 approximately.
That's great. That's helpful just to see that much of a difference with just $8,000 in power washing, and it just gets a facelift, right? So just some of those simple things. I'm a big believer in just incremental interventions like that, because I think they start to snowball. Steven-Alfonso, one of the things we've had the chance to work together in a number of these neighborhoods across the country, and I've just been fascinated working with the neighborhood trend analysis that NALCAB has developed. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So you talked about the indicators. There's also survey work that each of the communities does, and there's a lot of cleanup of the data. I know that NALCAB has worked with CoStar or they use CoStar data rather, but sometimes it's not perfect. So there's a lot of cleanup to do. But I thought it was important to mention, just for our audience who might be interested in using the neighborhood trend analysis. So it is available, as Steven-Alfonso shared. It's like a cookbook that you can download. I recommend, if you have someone who, or an AmeriCorps volunteer, or students, or working with your local university with GIS, I highly recommend that. But there is a lot of interest in far as the neighborhood trend analysis itself, the data score from 0 to 4 and what it means. Could you talk a little bit about how NALCAB developed the scoring system and what it corresponds to each level?
Yeah, so what we're really looking at is being able to see the amount, the percentage of change given each indicator compared to a city level. So there's a formula that we've been able to create that is based on similar work done around gentrification in other universities, including Berkeley and a few others that are in the northeast parts of the United States. And with that, we are measuring the amount of increase in each indicator that is then reflective of the score that is given. So then the density of change is then laid out on a score from sort of 0 to 4, based on what information was available from both census data, American Community Survey data. Additionally, areas that Manuel talked about, like CoStar. An additional tool that we use to be able to gain that data is Policy Map, which I would highly recommend to anyone that's looking to be able to deep dive into their own community. Additionally, what we're seeing whenever we work with some community organizations is there's also available data that is sometimes accessible to many people from their own city planning office that can be really helpful in the way that a organization can see not only home values, but as well as some commercial and small business information that is available based on the amount of businesses opening in the area. But it's really reflective of what the municipal and city government have in place and what that sharing model looks like. It may sometimes vary city to city and area, but what we're looking at is utilizing the access of localized data, federal data, and then going back and putting it into a reflective state with our formula for the neighborhood trend analysis, and then seeing how it scores out compared to additional changes they're seeing in growing parts of their own city.
Right. So, so number 4 is where neighborhood change is occurring the most, right?
That is the highest and like most densely populated areas of growth, and usually, like I was saying, we see those areas of ranking like a 4 is predominantly places that are having like new investment, and that can be like, hey, we're having a new tech firm come up on Avenue 3, and then that's why then we're going to see the home values as well as the rent really drastically increase on Avenue 6. And so seeing how the two items are really kind of work in tandem usually is how we're able to better predict and have one of many indicators of that what changes is to come.
Great. Yeah. Great. Thank you. We also have a few questions related to the funding of some of the programs. So certainly for the NALCAB equitable neighborhood development work, I know JP Morgan Chase is a big supporter of that work over a number of years now. And Larisa, you mentioned, right, it was the City of New York, LISC, and then also the organizations had to put in some funds as well. You're on mute.
City, as in Citibank,
Citibank.
was the funding partner, City Community Development. And, there's always there's a tension here around funders. They love these concepts and ideas for a year or two. And then, it's not a sexy idea anymore. And that's been our continual challenge. We've now done this exercise 3 times. And in each case, it's a different funder who sees it as new and sexy, and, the first time it was PNC Bank when we did this in Philadelphia and Chicago and Pittsburgh. The second time it was Citibank, who has a regional interest in New York. So we did this in New York cities. And now, at the state level, we're repeating this exercise in Mount Vernon. And that's coming with a $150,000 budget for capital and direct costs. But yet again, I've just seen, I'm sure LeJuano and Steven-Alfonso, you like experience this too. It's like you're at the whim of these organizations when we know the basics. You can't just drop into a community, address this issue in a year or two and walk away. And I think, LeJuano, that's why it's so critical that you're there every day. You're not going away, and why we really believe that the answer to this is helping our CBOs build their capacity and build their credibility so that they can pivot and find new funders after the first funder sort of gets tired.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue too for LeJuano, because I know the audience is interested in how many years has Sweet Auburn Works been operating, and just talk a little bit about the sustainability of the funding. You could talk a little bit about some of the mix of funders. It's always a challenge, right?
Manuel, I operate the organization with the idea that we close at any moment. I'm kidding. I will say this, guys. This is, there are permanent, there are persistent structural impediments to the work that we do to enfranchise, and give agency to our small business community in our neighborhoods, under remarkable duress from new capital that comes in. We believe that every neighborhood like ours has to have some level of intermediation, or just an intermediary group that sort of wedges itself between this onslaught of the, repatriation, revisiting the urban core and the neighborhoods that we occupy, and allow that capital to grow alongside us, to grow with us, to grow on our behalf, and not grow in spite of us or to push us away. I don't see at a legislative level, at a policy level, at a feel-good level, anything changing anytime soon. So, Manuel, to answer your question, we don't have a choice but to be here if we want to retain our cultural, our cultural narrative, our cultural heritage, our land, our small business community, our residences. How does the capital community feel about that? It's been a good last 2 years, obviously. People use the language of racial reckoning and all this stuff that has given a better dose of excitement and interest in the notion that that communities should be able to grow equitably and grow on their own terms. We are a 10-year-old organization. I can tell you that 10 years ago, that was not as easy a conversation. And if I were being pessimistic, I would say 5 years from now, it will be just as hard as 10 years ago. But I'm not going to be pessimistic. I'm going to tell you that I think when you see, I would like the audience to take a look at what they've just heard from a very high level of data agglomeration and using it to think critically about how policy affects the interventions that Larisa can make, that affect the interventions that I can make hand to hand, business to business, on the street. Every lineal foot of cracked sidewalk, every missing lamppost, every missing camera that we might need, every lineal foot of a bike lane that we'd like to have, and of course every storefront intervention where you walk in and you feel like you want to leave your money with my small business. All those things have to come together for this. I think we're building a remarkable industry and infrastructure to continue it. And I'm here with the rest of the team to continue to tell the story to foundations and corporates and anyone who will listen, to let them know that there's a subsidy involved in all of this and that we are here to use it properly to create some equitable growth. That's it.
So you should have a T-shirt that says perseverance, right? We should all wear that in this network. Perseverance, right? It's the name of the game. Just a quick follow-up, a yes or no question. So given, as you said, there's all this funding, given with all the racial reckoning, have they shown you the money, the old movie, they say? Are you seeing more funding because of that the past couple of years?
Yes. Our small business intervention that I referenced, I didn't tell you what it was. It's the name of the program is called the Spark Lab. It was seed funded by Bank of America to help me keep Black retailers in place. I made a very impassioned plea. I said, look, I'm going to create new footfalls. I'm going to create a great place for capital to land in this neighborhood. And there's no scenario where us growing as a Main Street program, us growing this neighborhood should push out my existing businesses. And they gave us an opportunity to, business by business, hand to hand, think about what our businesses didn't have, think about what their greatest needs are, and find a way to help bring resources to them, expertise to them. And I referenced before, you have to help a lot of folks just dream and feel like they can they can be ready to grow with the new footfalls, the new capital, the new income, and everything. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge in some of our neighborhoods, is making sure your small businesses have the mindset to grow. Recall the challenge we had during COVID. COVID was a mindset problem a lot of, I mean, I'm not underestimating the idea that COVID was COVID, but the ability for businesses to adapt had a lot to do with you helping your small business get in a mindset where they could work through change, work through uncertainty, follow these guidelines, and wake up in the morning and be ready to change on a dime to be able to take advantage of whatever opportunity was available to them.
Go ahead, Larisa.
If I may add to that, you know, I think one of the things we baked into our approach is our set of metrics that allow an organization to communicate that they have succeeded. You know, the survey work, the measuring of footfall, the testimonials, even if it's not, you know, the direct sales, success begets success. And many times CBOs don't want to toot their own horn. You know, there's something about those of us in the field. We're like, we just want to get the work done, you know. But you have to tell an amazing story about what you've done, because that's as important as what you've done. And so, you know, a lot of the overlay, LISC's overlay and my overlay, was to take on that storytelling on behalf of these organizations, because, you know, sometimes they struggle to do that really well. And so that's what we did. The presentation you saw, you know, they all had access to that. We got news coverage. We had the Wall Street Journal cover this effort. We had, you know, Fox News. I know people don't like Fox News, but you know, we had news coverage. That not Fox, like the local news, Fox local news. And I think that was really critical. And so businesses saw that and they got excited. And then funders saw that and saw, if I give money to this organization, I know something's going to happen. And that's what we have to lean into.
Yeah. So that's a great, and just, we have 3 minutes left, but I wanted to make sure we got to this question. So I actually wanted to start out with you, Larisa, and then Steven-Alfonso and LeJuano to finish out. You know, one of the things, this is one of the questions in our chat, and this is one of the things that I keep hearing over and over in communities that I've done work in. There's sometimes a fear that if you start fixing things up, it's going to look too nice, and then the taxes are going to go up. So I'm just curious, and Larisa, you've had like a few years out from this work in New York, some other places. Have you seen that as a result, or were there any policy interventions to help prevent that? Just curious to see what the fallout.
Well, not just taxes go up, but rent. You know, that an owner is going to think that, you know, all of a sudden this place is much more valuable. I think that's a concern, but we haven't seen it fleshed out, you know, in the long term. So the businesses we helped are still there, and their sales have increased. And when you increase your sales, you can pay more in rent. So they are able to sort of weather these increases, but you know, they haven't faced the full force of gentrification there. And in any of the neighborhoods you saw, you know, we haven't seen the kind of gentrification trends that we've seen in other places. So perhaps, you know, perhaps we would, if that were the case. If this were Fort Greene, for instance, or Myrtle Avenue, in you know, close to downtown Brooklyn, we absolutely saw displacement. So I think some of the market dynamics were a bit different. I think you got to get ahead of the game, and then also help people buy their spaces ultimately, so that they're not displaced.
That's right. That's, I know there's a big interest in the network. I'm buying your property, which is great to see, you know, some of the examples that Sweet Auburn is doing. Steven-Alfonso, in the last minute, have you know, there have been a number of years now for some equitable neighborhood development organizations. Have you seen this trend or heard back from communities where they've seen increases in rents that have made it more difficult because of the interventions or taxes?
I think we've definitely been able to see that trend's looming, not so much that it is drastic as I think that some people may assume, but it's in those efforts, I think it's equally important for us to be thinking of how we are putting in policy measures, as well as how are we working with our community actively with those businesses to be able to use associations, to use large community gatherings to be able to vocalize the need for those safety measures. We're also talking very much about how we are trying to tell that story. And just as Larisa was saying, taking the time for the businesses as well as for the organizations that are convening those businesses, as well as community members, how are we using that voice and that position to be able to best put us, the community, small business owners, into a place where we can be able to see a more equally developed, more place of great growth for everyone at the table. And so, and part of that is going to be using data. Part of that's going to be using time to be able to put those information and plans together, but then really kind of taking suit of what needs to be able to be taken care of.
Great. Well, thank you, Steven. You have the last word, so it gives us some homework to do. I know some of our other sessions are going to cover policy today, but I want to thank LeJuano and Larisa and Steven-Alfonso for a great session. I hope all of you got a lot out of this, and let's keep on working together to keep our small businesses in place. So thank you for being here, and have a great afternoon, and see you at the rest of the sessions. Bye.
Thank you.